Since it is the winter season, I decided that for today's review, we are going to look at an older DC figure that came out, I would like to say, roughly 2 to 3 years ago. He is not new, and it is the Frost King from Endless Winter. He is also the build figure from the Endless Winter build wave for those who have not heard of this wave before, if you got into collecting DC Multiverse under Mcfarlane a little bit later. So, yeah, there's that information. Now, who is Frost King for those who have never heard of this character? Well, I don't even know who he is. So, for this review, I actually did search up a little bio on who he is in the wiki because build figures do not include data profile cards. And it reads, he was originally a man called Edward Olafsson. I hope I'm pronouncing that last name correct, but I feel like I actually butchered it. And acquired his moniker because his fellow Norsemen believed him to be an incarnation of the mythical Frost King. After a battle with a team consisting of Hippolyta, Black Adam, Viking Prince, and Swamp Thing, he was buried for 1,000 years in a glacier that would eventually house the Fortress of Solitude. When the fortress was destroyed, the Frost King was unleashed into the world once again, now enhanced with Kryptonian energy. And I'm just going to show this picture right here really quickly. You have a nice artwork of, the character right there. Really cool. And that is a read-up on who the Frost King is, basically. Sounds like a very normal villain. Nothing too special going on. But, yeah. All right. So, does he come with any accessories? He does. It's always nice when a build figure does include accessories. He has a sword, of course, and it is made of ice. That's what it's supposed to be, I am assuming, because all the other ice bits on the figure are also the same color. It is a nice-looking sword. However, it's just sad that you can see, like, all the sculpted details on it are just buried in this, color, which, if they painted this part different, it would have made a lot of the texturing and details here stand out more. And I think that's kind of the one problem I have with the sword, is that it's so, plain looking from a distance. But then when you look closely at the hilt, you see all these details that are present. And it's just sad to see that this was how it was painted. Now, of course, if you're a customizer, you can, change that easily with paint. And that is kind of the one thing that I want to point out already right away, is that this figure has beautiful sculpted details, beautiful texturing, but there's a lot of it that is just unpainted. Like, they did not bother to paint it at all. They just left it the way it is, and it just feels like it was very incomplete for a build figure. And that is the one downside to this figure that I don't like. Now, can I change it? Of course, if I can learn to customize my action figures, which I do want to, I can definitely change all these mistakes that they made when they made this figure, because they didn't bother to paint it. So, and we're going to talk about that right now, what areas that I'm talking about. So let's start with the head, of course, before we go into all that, because the head sculpt is also very nicely sculpted. And as you can see, there is the Frost King right there. Looks pretty cool. He does have a long beard, and he also has long hair on the back. Let me try to... Oh, okay. I almost dropped the figure. So as you can see, all that beautiful hair detail. So head sculpt is not bad. It came out really good. He also has the ice horns on his head, or more like forehead, actually. It's coming out of his forehead. Really cool. Now, you're not going to really get much movement with the head because of the fact that all these pieces down here do hinder, looking up and looking down. He can move his head side to side, but that's pretty much it. So head articulation is pretty much barren. And that is basically a look at his head sculpt. Now we can get into the details that I feel like should be painted, and it's sad that they're not. So when you see the straps on his arms right here, let's start with this. this could easily be a different color, right? You can probably paint it brown and paint some silver in there. Just the fact that it's all gray makes no sense, because we know that in real life, arm gauntlets with straps are always like a different color underneath. It's the same thing with this side as well. But again, the fact that this detail is here just shows that the sculpting behind this figure, there was a lot of care put into this one. Like, they didn't just like slap something together and call it a day. Like, the fact that they actually put effort into sculpting all these little tiny details on a figure like this, because, you know, there have been some figures that have released that do not have as much details as this one would have, in my opinion. And the fact that it's all there just shows that there was a lot of care behind the production of this particular figure, even if he's lesser known. And the fact that they actually wanted to make this the best version that we'll ever get, it just shows. But they were just one step behind, and I was just not painting it. But again, yeah, easily something that can be fixed if you are a customizer. Now, if you're like me, who's not a customizer, I mean, I think it's still fine to leave it this color if you're okay with it, because it does work with the rest of the body, like the armor and all this stuff. But, you know, I see so many good customs of this figure that people have done, and it just makes me want to do the same thing too. So, yeah. And now we can also talk about the armor pieces. As you can see, there's all these like dents and stuff. I think the color for the armor is fine. And also down here, I think it's okay. But again, if you want to put a wash over it and try to make it look like it's more realistic, there's more of like a color tone difference, you can. And then this is another thing that I love. So I think during this time, when this figure came out as a build figure in this wave, this was around the same time that they were really, really focusing on texture on action figures. You can see all these grid lines on his legs. You know, some other companies would easily just paint it over and not even have any of these textures, right? But the fact that they included it anyways, even if it's just one straight gray, shows that there is a lot of work put into the sculpting, and I really love that. But again, it's just buried in the same color. Like, for example, the boots, if you wanted to stand out and make it look different, you definitely could paint these straps, right? And if you also notice that these white parts are supposed to be like ice, I think that's what they're supposed to be. This was another like bad thing right here. They didn't paint it all the way through to the back. So, you know, there's certain things that I don't know why they left it this way. They could have easily painted it, but they decided not to. So like down here with the boots, with these ice parts, right? Same thing on this side. But again, it just gives so much freedom to anyone who is like a customizer to just go back in and just do all these changes. Like if you look at the gauntlet on this side, you know, this is fur. It shouldn't be gray, right? That makes no sense. Because up here, you can see the fur color is like light gray. So there is a difference in color. So, yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting that there are so much areas that are just left in this, you know, muted color that has no difference or contrast. So, and then on this side, you know, you have these crystals, and they're all the same color. They're all ice, but they're all like in this green, which, you know, I guess it works. It's not like a completely bad color, but if you don't like this type of color and you do know how to change it, definitely something you can do. So now we can take a look at the back, which is another part of the figure that I want to talk about. So his cape does come off, and as you can see, there is a porthole right here for the cape, and the cape does have a peg that goes in. And again, these details do pick up from front to back, so it's just all there. So yeah, it's a really, really nice looking figure in terms of like the texturing and the details, but just the lack of paint makes it very sad to look at sometimes. Just reminding me like they could have painted it completely if they wanted to. But maybe there was like a budget cost or something. I don't know. You know, there's always a reason behind why sometimes companies, do this. The other reason could be they could have been lazy. Who knows? Um, as for the cape, you can see that there is also the fur texture, and it's all gray. It shouldn't be all gray. I feel like if this was painted with like a different color of white, it could be brown, whatever fur color works, it could definitely make this stand out more. As for the rest of the cape, you see the same texturing going on, and it's so nice when they do that, because I miss capes like this. Now, I do like cloth wired capes as well, but if you ever have to go back to sculpting like capes again where it's not, cloth wired style, this is the way to do it, right? Don't make it plain, give a texture like this. And you can see that on the bottom, it's also the same problem too. This is supposed to be like ice bits that are not painted. So, yeah. And on the inside of the cape, same texturing. So, really, really nice. Everything on this figure is just nicely detailed, but just left with no paint on it to make it stand out, which is so sad. And how you put this cape back on, you just, port the peg back in there, and then it just goes right back in. And there you have it. He is back with the cape on. Now, for his articulation, it is very simple. He is not going to articulate much because, like I said, his head, you can't look down, you can't look up. Look down, look up. I mean, he can't look up, he can't look down. He can't turn his head. Well, he can turn his head side to side, but these armor pieces do get in the way. As for his arms, they can't really lift out too much because the armor pieces, again, will hinder his articulation. So pretty much he's very limited. Same thing with this side, right? Very limited. As for his waist piece, he does rotate, and it is one entire piece. There is no cut up here, so there's no upper torso articulation. As for his legs, they don't really kick out. Because one, these pieces get in the way, and just the way that the legs are like pegged in when you assemble this guy, they go all the way into the port. So when you're trying to kick this leg out, you're not going to get much movement. And he does have double jointed articulation, but my copy is still very tight. And it's crazy because even though this figure is like really old now, he still feels like I built him yesterday. That's just how interesting the feeling of this figure feels to me right now. It felt like I just put this guy together yesterday, and not like, but in reality, it was like 2 to 3 years ago. As for his feet, they do move. There is a swivel, kind of. Yeah, it works. It's just tight. There is toe articulation, and that's basically it. It's very simple. You're not going to really get him into any sort of crazy action poses because of the fact that the legs can't really kick out too much. So that's kind of the one bummer with articulation. But man, does it make for a good looking figure. That's the other thing I love, is the fact that this thing looks so cool on the shelf, right? So as for his sword, if you want that on his hand, I will try to show that. Let me see if I can show it. If I can't... Oh, I forgot. The arms. They're single jointed, so they do have the rotation thing here. But again, it's very tight. And there is rotation with the hands as well here. They should swivel. But again, super tight. And there is a hinge joint. So one last thing there. I almost left that out. As for sword, I don't think I can show that on camera because it's very finicky to put in. Basically, you just put the sword into his hand. And I haven't done this in a long time, so I don't even remember how to. Oh, there we go. Okay. So there's the sword in his hands. Very cool looking sword. So this is what happens when he has it. Very cool. And now, let's talk about comparisons, because he is not a small figure. He is pretty good size for a villain figure. And I want to do some comparisons. So here he is next to a regular 7-inch DC figure, for example. Oh, I knocked him down. That was not supposed to happen. Oh, his cape got in the front of the sword. Here, let's actually move him. Here we go. He's big, right? And that's a little bit of a foreshadowing for a certain somebody that I'm going to make a review on. And this is another spoiler, not really spoilers at this point, another figure that we will be looking at very soon. And there's Anti-Monitor. And it's crazy because Anti-Monitor is a mega figure. And this guy is a build figure, but they're like the same height. So, yeah, mega figures have varied in sizes, and I still think that the Swamp Thing is a good example of what a mega figure should be. This is pretty much no different from this build figure. They're both the same height. So, yeah. But there you have it. That is our look at Frost King, a very old figure from a while back, but it is nice to revisit and look at this figure again after all these years. It is still one of my other favorite build figures that I've ever built, and I don't know if we'll ever see something like this ever again. I really don't, because it's been a while since we've seen any build figure that had this level of details to it. That's my opinion. All right. If you found today's review informative, do give this video a like. If you want to subscribe to my channel and keep updated with other action figure reviews that I do and whatever other content that I have going on my channel, you can. You don't have to. In the end of the day, I make these videos for fun. And with that said, take care, and I will see you in the next video.